In recent months, the escalation of tensions between the United States and China has moved beyond diplomatic statements and turned into a serious test for one of the most vulnerable sectors of the American economy: agriculture. When current U.S. President Donald Trump announced his intention to impose tariffs of up to 500% on imports of Chinese goods, it seemed the goal was clear: hit Chinese industry, prove that America comes first, and strengthen his domestic electorate. But it turned out that the blow is mostly self-inflicted. Against the backdrop of this aggressive tariff course, the Chinese side has virtually stopped purchasing American agricultural products, primarily soybeans and other grains. In September 2025, China did not import a single ton of American soybeans for the first time in 7 years. This means that despite a favorable harvest, American farmers have lost access to their largest buyer, and therefore a key source of income many Midwest farmers were counting on. The problem for Trump is that farmers are one of his core electoral bases. Promising to make America great again, he relied on the support of rural counties and the political loyalty of agricultural producers. But by imposing unprecedented tariffs on Chinese imports, he stripped those farmers of their main buyer, the Chinese market. Now, it is they who are facing multi-billion-dollar losses. Several sources provide rough estimates. Research and reports indicate that the American agricultural sector acknowledges it will bear the brunt of the tariff war's consequences. More than 76% of surveyed farmers believe that they, the American agricultural producers, will take the main hit from the tariffs and China's retaliatory measures. Moreover, analysts note that the planned $10 to $15 billion in aid promised by the Trump administration to farming operations is more of a temporary safety net than a solution to a systemic problem. Farmers have taken a blow on two fronts. On one hand, they have lost an export market that many relied on for a significant share of income. On the other, they face rising costs. Fertilizers, equipment, and fuel are all more expensive. In southern Minnesota, where soybean harvesting has just finished, large silos are full of crops, but there is no demand. The Chinese market is almost closed. Farmers are asking themselves who they will sell to now and whether they can cover their costs at current prices and conditions. From Trump's political perspective, the strategy is familiar: restrict Chinese imports to protect the American worker and strengthen the U.S. position in negotiations. But in the end, American farmers have become hostages of their own tariffs and China's countermeasures. And if the grain is not sold, the farmer suffers losses that could undermine a key pillar of the administration's political base. From China's perspective, the logic is simple. If the U.S. imposes high tariffs, China can simply stop buying American grain and look elsewhere. South America is already filling the gap, with Brazil and Argentina increasing soybean supplies to China. As a result, China is redirecting its purchases, and American farmers are left out of the game. Meanwhile, Washington is discussing multi-billion-dollar support for agricultural producers through subsidies, compensations, and tax breaks. But the question arises: if the battle was fought through tariffs, why subsidies? If farmers were supposed to benefit from market competition and export sales, why are they now receiving direct assistance? The logic of tariffs collapses when losses are covered by the state budget. And this is where the main dilemma lies. Tariffs and subsidies are not just economic policy, they are a political trap. If subsidies become the norm, farmers will lose the incentive to compete on the global market. If tariffs keep rising, export opportunities decline. If the market collapses, assistance becomes a necessity. But then the question arises: why start a tariff war if the results are the opposite? For Trump, this is truly a catastrophic problem created out of nothing, as insider commentary in the editorial offices of leading American media puts it. Some experts point out that the recent increase in farm aid is driven by the market's inability, due to China's retaliatory measures, to absorb American products. What comes next? Several scenarios are on the horizon. Negotiations with China could lead to partial concessions, tariff reductions, and the resumption of soybean purchases. Farmers would regain their export market, and Trump could present this as a victory. A second scenario is alternative markets. The U.S. could try to redirect agricultural exports to other countries, but this requires time, logistics, and infrastructure. Meanwhile, China has already adapted to alternative suppliers. A third scenario is state support through subsidies, compensations, and agricultural grants. But this turns farming into a government-dependent sector and carries political risks. Voters may begin to feel that the promised American markets are not working. The key question is whether Trump can escape this trap without serious damage to his electoral base, the farmers, while maintaining the image of strength in the trade war with China. If not, the political consequences could be significant. In conclusion, the situation looks like this. On the surface, there is a loud tariff war with China, but behind it, one of the pillars of America's domestic politics is being undermined: agriculture. A good harvest, but no buyer. Promises of aid, but a fundamental question: why start a war if the market is closed and then reopened through subsidies? This is not just a flawed economic strategy. It is a strategic mistake with political risks. And the solution that must be found will not be merely technical, but deeply political. But perhaps the most alarming aspect of this entire story is that the crisis is already spilling beyond the economy. In America's heartland, Iowa, Kansas, Nebraska, South Dakota, social discontent is rising. Politico, citing internal reports from the National Farmers Association, writes that the bankruptcy rate among small farms has reached its highest level since 2010. In some counties, the average farmer carries a debt burden of more than $250,000, and local banks have begun mass refusals to refinance seasonal loans. This is not just an economic downturn, it is the beginning of a rural crisis that could shatter the president's political base on the eve of an election cycle. American television channels are increasingly showing stories of farmers forced to sell equipment or land to cover losses. CNN recently aired a report titled "Heartland on the Edge," where a farmer from Illinois tearfully said, "I voted for Trump. I believed he would protect us. But now my silos are full of grain nobody wants." The episode instantly went viral and, according to analysts, became the first real warning sign for the administration. At the same time, Beijing is methodically exploiting America's weak spots. Chinese state media are actively broadcasting footage from rural America, where empty fields and abandoned barns have become a visual symbol of the trade war's consequences. This is no longer just a retaliatory measure. It is an information offensive designed to show that Trump's policy is hurting America itself. Interestingly, in recent weeks, shares of agricultural companies in South America, Brazil, and Argentina have been rising on Chinese exchanges. These countries are now taking America's place in exporting soybeans and corn to China. This is, in effect, an irreversible shift in global trade flows. What was built over decades is collapsing in a matter of months. And perhaps the key question even Trump supporters are asking today is, where does this lead? Will the White House be able to keep control of the situation, or will America face a domestic crisis, not financial but political, when its own voters stop believing in the slogan "America First"?